Welcome back to the channel Rare Coins Collections, that uncovers the hidden stories behind the coins in your pocket, where even the smallest piece of change can hide a jaw-dropping secret. Today, we're turning our attention to a coin that almost everyone has seen, used, or spent without a second thought. It's tiny, it's silver-colored, and it barely gets noticed. But let me tell you, there's one version of this coin that's been quietly making waves in the world of coin collectors. We're talking about the 1989 Roosevelt dime. Yes, you heard that right. That little 10-cent piece with President Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile on it. One of them sold for an absolutely unbelievable amount of money, and by the time we get to the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to look for and how much it was worth in words. So grab your change jar, because this is going to get interesting. Let's start with the basics. The Roosevelt dime was first introduced in 1946, just a year after FDR's death. It was created to honor his legacy, especially his tireless work in fighting polio, symbolized by the torch on the reverse side of the coin, flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch, representing peace, strength, and liberty. By the time 1989 rolled around, the Roosevelt dime had already been in production for over 4 decades. Millions of them were minted that year, hundreds of millions, actually. They were produced in both Philadelphia and Denver, with the familiar P or D mint mark just above the date on the obverse side. At first glance, the 1989 dime doesn't look special at all. It's made of a copper-nickel blend, weighs about 2.27 grams, and measures just under 18 millimeters in diameter. A simple, everyday coin you wouldn't think twice about handing over at a vending machine. But here's the thing, every once in a while, something goes wrong at the US Mint, and in the world of coin collecting, those mistakes are where the magic happens. Collectors call them mint errors, and they can turn a basic coin into a fortune. Now, in 1989, there were a few dimes that came out of the mint just a little different. Let's talk about some of the rarest and most valuable kinds of Roosevelt dimes from that year. First, we've got the off-center strike. That's when the coin isn't aligned properly in the press, so part of the design is missing. The more off-center the strike is, without losing the date, the more valuable it becomes. Next, there's the missing clad layer. These dimes are struck without the nickel coating, exposing the copper core and giving the coin a strange reddish tone. It's a huge red flag to collectors, and they love it. Then there's the double die error, where the coin was struck twice, leaving a ghost-like doubling in the words, "Liberty, in God we trust," or the date itself. Some of these errors are barely visible, but the ones that show clearly, those are the big money makers. And here's one more curveball: wrong planchet errors. That's when a dime is accidentally struck on a coin blank meant for a different denomination, like a penny or a foreign coin. These are extremely rare and super valuable. Now, let's talk about the discovery that blew everyone's minds. A coin collector, just like you or me, was going through a batch of coins. Nothing fancy. Just some old change picked up from banks, pocket money, and rolls of dimes. And in that batch, he spotted something unusual. A 1989 dime that looked normal, but felt slightly off. He took a closer look under magnification. The details were sharper. The color was subtly different. The edge didn't look quite like the others. So, he sent it in for professional grading and verification. The results: the coin was a rare transitional error, one of only a tiny handful ever found. It was struck on the wrong planchet, in nearly perfect condition, and fully authenticated by grading experts. And when that dime hit the auction house, let's just say jaws dropped. After a bidding war between serious collectors, this tiny 10-cent coin, something most of us wouldn't notice if it fell under the couch, ended up selling for a mind-blowing amount. That one little Roosevelt dime from 1989 sold for $32,000, yes. $32,000, for a dime. So what does this mean for you? It means that the next time you're counting out change, don't overlook those dimes. Especially 1989 Roosevelt dimes. Look for odd colors, strange edges, doubling in the lettering, or coins that feel just a little bit different, because while most dimes are worth exactly 10 cents, every now and then, one is worth more than a new car. Today, we're zooming in on a coin that you've probably used to pay for parking, bought gum with, or maybe tossed in a tip jar without a second thought. It's silver-colored, small, and totally easy to ignore. But what if I told you that a certain version of this everyday coin is now one of the most sought-after modern dimes in coin collecting history? We're talking about the 1992 Roosevelt dime. That's right. One tiny 10-cent coin from the early 90s, something that looks like it came out of your pocket yesterday, might actually be a hidden gem. And today, we're breaking down why this particular coin has caught the attention of collectors across the country and what exactly makes it worth so much more than face value. So buckle up and stay with me till the end, because we're going to reveal a real-life sale that stunned the numismatic world. Let's rewind to 1992. Bill Clinton was elected president, gas was just over $1 a gallon, and the World Wide Web was starting to make its way into homes. Meanwhile, over at the U.S. Mint, the Roosevelt dime was still being produced like clockwork, just like it had been every year since 1946. This coin features the familiar portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt on the front, and on the reverse, the torch flanked by olive and oak branches, representing liberty, peace, and strength. Pretty standard stuff, right? But here's where things get interesting. In 1992, the Mint struck Roosevelt dimes at both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities. That means you'll find a small P or D mint mark just above the date. These coins were made from a copper-nickel-clad composition, like most modern dimes, so from the outside, they look completely normal, but hidden in the shadows of mass production, a few mistakes slipped through. And those mistakes are exactly what makes this coin valuable. Let's talk about what kind of errors and varieties turn a 1992 dime from pocket change into a prized collector's piece. One of the most exciting possibilities is the off-metal error. This happens when a dime is struck on a blank meant for a different coin, like a penny or even a foreign denomination. That means the coin might have the right design but the wrong color, the wrong size, or the wrong weight. These kinds of errors are extremely rare and almost always valuable. Another major thing to look for is a double die. That's when a coin is struck twice in slightly misaligned positions, creating a shadow-like doubling effect in the letters and numbers. On the 1992 dime, you'd want to closely inspect the words, "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date. Doubling in any of those areas? That's a sign of something special. Then there are the off-center strikes, where the design is pushed to one side, leaving a blank crescent on the coin. The more dramatic the off-center error, the higher the value, especially if the date is still visible. And let's not forget the ever-elusive proof strike released into circulation by mistake. Proof coins are made with extra care, sharp details, and mirrored surfaces, and they're supposed to be sold to collectors, not spent in grocery stores. But once in a while, one slips through, and when it does, that dime becomes a collector's dream. So how do you know if your 1992 dime is one of these rare varieties? First, weigh it. A normal clad dime should weigh about 2.27 grams. Anything lighter or heavier could mean it was struck on the wrong planchet. Next, look at the edge. A regular dime should show a band of copper between two layers of silver-colored metal. If the edge looks solid or copperless, you may have something rare. Finally, get out a magnifier. Look for unusual spacing in the lettering, doubling, or any part of the design that looks off. Even the tiniest error could be worth a second look. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. There was a collector, someone just like you, who spotted something strange about a 1992 Roosevelt dime in a collection. It wasn't flashy. It didn't look out of the ordinary at first. But when weighed and examined, it turned out to be struck on a planchet meant for a foreign coin, making it one of the few known examples of its kind. That coin was authenticated, graded, and eventually sold at a high-profile auction, and the final sale price, that one little Roosevelt dime from 1992, normally worth 10 cents, was purchased by a serious collector for a jaw-dropping $30,000. Yes. $30,000. So the next time you're about to hand over a dime without thinking, take a second. Flip it over. Look closely. Weigh it if you have to. Because something that seems completely ordinary might just be hiding an extraordinary secret. Today, we're diving into a coin that's younger than most in your collection, but don't let its age fool you. It's small. It's shiny. It's something you've probably used without a second glance. We're talking about the 2005 Roosevelt dime. Now, you might be thinking, come on, a dime from 2005? That's too recent to be worth anything, right? Well, here's the thing, that's exactly what makes this coin so fascinating, because in a year where billions of coins were minted and passed through millions of hands, a few extraordinary dimes slipped through with rare flaws, and those tiny errors have turned an ordinary 10-cent coin into something worth thousands of dollars. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll know what to look for and exactly how much one rare version of the 2005 Roosevelt dime sold for at auction, and trust me, you won't believe your ears when you hear it. Let's get into it. So first, a little background. The Roosevelt dime has been around since 1946, created in honor of President Franklin D. Roosevelt after his death. The design, featuring his profile on the front and a torch with olive and oak branches on the back, has stayed remarkably consistent for decades, and by 2005, most people had stopped paying any special attention to these coins. After all, they were still being minted in the hundreds of millions every single year. That year alone, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 1.4 billion dimes, and the Denver Mint added more than 1.5 billion. That's right, billions. So, what could possibly make a 2005 dime stand out in a sea of identical coins? Let's talk about it, because in coin collecting, perfection is common, but imperfection is rare. The most valuable coins are the ones with errors, those unintentional quirks made during production that sneak out of the mint and end up in circulation. And believe it or not, some of the most dramatic coin errors have happened in recent years. For the 2005 Roosevelt dime, there are a few specific things that collectors are on the hunt for. First up, missing clad layer errors. Modern dimes are made of a copper core sandwiched between two layers of nickel. But sometimes, one of those outer layers is missing, exposing the reddish copper underneath. These dimes look totally different from normal ones, and if you're not paying attention, you could miss one right in your pocket change. Next, there's the off-center strike. This happens when the coin blank isn't properly aligned in the press, and the design ends up shifted or partially missing. The more off-center it is, and the more of the date that's still visible, the more valuable the coin becomes. Then we've got the wrong planchet errors. These are extremely rare but incredibly exciting. This occurs when a dime is struck on a coin blank meant for another denomination, like a penny, a nickel, or even a foreign coin. The result? A coin that looks and feels wrong, but still has a Roosevelt dime design on it. These oddballs are like gold to collectors, and don't forget about double die errors, where part of the coin, especially the words like Liberty or In God We Trust, looks like it's been stamped twice. It's subtle, but unmistakable once you know what to look for. Now, here's the part that gives you goosebumps. Point 1. Collector, casually going through a handful of pocket change, spotted a 2005 Roosevelt dime that didn't look quite right. It had a slightly reddish hue and felt a bit lighter than normal. Instead of ignoring it, they took a closer look, and what they had was extraordinary. The dime turned out to be struck on a copper penny planchet, meaning it wasn't supposed to exist in the first place. It was verified by experts, graded for its condition and rarity, and then put on the market for collectors across the country to see. When the coin finally went to auction, well, let's just say nobody expected what happened next. The bids rolled in. Collectors knew this was something special. And in the end, that little 10-cent coin, struck by mistake and hidden in plain sight for years, sold for a jaw-dropping amount. That 2005 Roosevelt dime sold for $27,000. Yes, you heard that right, $27,000 for a coin that most people would have dropped in a parking meter. So here's the big question. Could you have one? Check your change. Look for odd colors, misaligned designs, missing details, or anything that feels off. And if something catches your eye, get it weighed, get it examined, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be the next person to cash in big on a tiny coin. Today, we're diving into a coin that's small in size, but massive in value. If you know what to look for. We're talking about the 1967 Roosevelt dime. That's right. A dime from the 60s, one that most people think is worth exactly 10 cents, has been making waves in the coin collecting world, and it's all because of some very rare versions that slipped past the eyes of the US Mint. And one of those dimes? It went on to sell for more than some brand new cars on the market today. Stick around, because we're saving the final value reveal for the very end, and trust me, it's worth the wait. Let's rewind the clock to 1967. It was a time of transformation in the United States. The Vietnam War was raging, the summer of love was in full swing, and the Beatles were at the top of the charts. But while the world was changing on a global scale, something else was happening behind the scenes at the US Mint, something that would make certain 1967 dimes incredibly valuable decades later. To understand what makes the 1967 Roosevelt dime so special, we need to talk about what was going on in the coin world at the time. In the mid-60s, the US Mint was dealing with a major coin shortage. The price of silver had skyrocketed, and people were hoarding coins left and right. In response, the government made a bold decision. They removed silver from dimes and quarters starting in 1965 and switched to a copper-nickel-clad composition, but that wasn't the only change. From 1965 through 1967, the mint also stopped using mint marks on coins to discourage hoarding. That means every dime from 1967, whether it was made in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, looks exactly the same on the surface, no little letter to tell you where it came from. Sounds simple enough, right? But that's where things get interesting, because during high-speed mass production, mistakes happen. And when they do, collectors take notice. Let's talk about what to look for in a valuable 1967 Roosevelt dime. First up, off-metal errors. These are dimes that were accidentally struck on coin blanks meant for a different denomination, like a penny, nickel, or even a foreign coin. If the dime is the wrong color, feels unusually light or heavy, or just looks off, you could be holding a valuable error coin. Then, we have missing clad layer errors. Remember, dimes after 1965 were made of copper sandwiched between two layers of nickel. But sometimes, one of those nickel layers doesn't get applied properly. The result? A dime that has a reddish or coppery tone on one side. These stand out visually, and they're highly sought after by collectors. Another thing to look for? Double die strikes. That's when a coin is stamped twice, leaving a subtle but clear doubling effect, especially noticeable in the lettering and numbers. If you see shadowy outlines on words like Liberty or In God We Trust, your dime might be one of the rare double dies. There are also off-center strikes, where the design is pushed to one side, leaving part of the coin blank. The more off-center it is, while still showing the date, the more valuable it becomes. Now here's where it gets even more intriguing. Some 1967 Roosevelt dimes were found to have proof-like surfaces, even though the mint was not supposed to be releasing proof coins for circulation that year. These mirror-like dimes have sharp details and frosty finishes. If you find one of these, you might have something really special. So how do you know if your 1967 dime is worth more than 10 cents? First, check for any unusual color, especially a reddish or bronze tone. That could be a missing clad layer. Second, weigh your coin. A normal clad dime should weigh about 2.27 grams. Anything significantly lighter or heavier could indicate an off-metal strike. Third, use a magnifier to inspect the lettering and date for doubling, misalignment, or unusual shapes. And finally, don't forget to look at the edge. Dimes should have a ridged edge with a visible copper layer. If the edge looks solid or weirdly colored, that's another clue you could be holding something special. So now comes the moment you've been waiting for. One particularly rare 1967 Roosevelt dime was discovered with a combination of these rare traits. It had been struck on the wrong planchet, had sharp, clear details, and showed signs of an error that shouldn't have left the mint. This coin was authenticated, graded at a top-tier level, and entered into a high-stakes auction, where collectors competed fiercely for the chance to own it. And in the end, that simple dime, worth just 10 cents to most people, was purchased by a collector for $37,000. Yes, you heard that right, $37,000. So the next time you're going through a handful of change, don't overlook the dimes. Especially those from 1967. What looks ordinary at first glance could be hiding a rare minting mistake, and a small fortune. If this story blew your mind, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments if you've ever found a strange or rare coin in your collection. You never know, your next find could be worth tens of thousands. Today, we're talking about a coin that most people overlook every single day, the 1985 Roosevelt dime. It's small. It's common. It's something you've probably spent 100 times without thinking. But what if I told you that among all those 1985 dimes, there are a few incredibly rare ones that could be worth more than a down payment on a house? That's right, there's a version of this dime that's sold for a staggering amount, and we're going to reveal that exact number at the very end. So stick around, because this is one coin story you don't want to miss. Let's go back to 1985 for a moment. Ronald Reagan was in the White House. Back to the Future hit the big screen. Michael Jordan had just been drafted to the NBA. And somewhere in the middle of all that, the US Mint was pumping out millions of Roosevelt dimes, billions. Actually, the 1985 dime, like others of its time, featured the familiar design of President Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and the torch, oak, and olive branches on the reverse, symbolizing liberty, strength, and peace. Coins were minted in both Philadelphia and Denver that year. You can tell which is which by the small P or D mint mark above the date on the obverse side. Now, most of those dimes were made perfectly. Mass-produced, machine-struck, nothing unusual. But every so often, and this is where things get exciting, something goes wrong, and in the coin collecting world, wrong often means valuable. Let's talk about the types of mint errors and variations that could make your 1985 dime worth way more than face value. First, we have the off-center strike. These are dimes where the design was not perfectly centered during the minting process. You might see part of the lettering or date shifted or even missing entirely. The more off-center, while still showing the date, the more collectors will pay. Next, there's the wrong planchet error. This is where a dime is mistakenly struck on a blank meant for a different denomination, like a penny or even a foreign coin. These mistakes are rare, but when they happen, they can produce a coin that looks off in color, weight, or thickness. If you've ever seen a dime that looks reddish like a penny, don't spend it, inspect it. Then we've got missing clad layer errors. Modern dimes are made from a copper core and a nickel outer layer. But sometimes, that top layer isn't applied correctly. The result? A dime with a weird reddish or copper appearance on one or both sides, and a ticket straight to the collector's market. And of course, there's the famous double die error, where the coin is struck more than once in slightly different positions. Look closely at the words, "Liberty, in God we trust," and the date. If you see any doubling or shadow-like effects, your coin might be a double die, and that's a big deal. Now here's where it all comes together. Point 1 1985 Roosevelt dime, discovered by a sharp-eyed collector, looked just a little off. The edge didn't have the usual copper stripe. The surface looked strange. And when it was weighed, it came up lighter than a normal dime. Curious, the collector sent it in for professional grading. What came back was nothing short of shocking. The coin had been struck on a foreign planchet, making it a rare off-metal error. It was in pristine condition, certified authentic, and verified as one of only a handful of similar errors known to exist from that year. And when that dime finally went to auction, it didn't just sell, it stunned. Collectors from across the country entered a bidding war for this one-of-a-kind piece. The coin's rarity, combined with its flawless condition, made it a must-have for elite collectors. And the final sale price, that humble little 1985 Roosevelt dime, the same kind you've probably spent without a second thought, sold for $28,000. Yes. You heard that right. $28,000. So the next time you're digging through your coin jar, or about to hand over a dime at the store, take a moment to flip it over, look at the edge, check the color, and inspect the details. Because what looks like ordinary change might just be the rare error coin that changes everything. If this video opened your eyes to the world of valuable coins, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more awesome coin stories, and drop a comment below if you've ever found a coin that seemed a little off. Who knows? Maybe you're sitting on a hidden fortune right now. Thanks for watching, and remember, never underestimate the value of what's in your pocket.